Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
This story is about trade between two countries, the United States and Japan. Trade means buying and selling things between countries. For a long time, the U.S. and Japan have traded many things, like cars and food. But now the relationship is difficult. The President of the United States, President Trump, recently said something important on social media. He talked about Japan and rice. He said Japan does not buy American rice, even though Japan has a big problem with not having enough rice. Because of problems like this, the president is thinking about new rules for trade with Japan. These new rules are called tariffs. Tariffs are like extra taxes on things that a country buys from another country. The U.S. government might put a 24% tariff on many goods from Japan. This means that for every $100 of Japanese goods, the U.S. government would add $24. This would make Japanese goods much more expensive in the U.S. There is a date that is very important. It is July 9. This date is a deadline. It is the day when these new tariffs could start. So there is not much time left to find a solution. The trade relationship between the U.S. and Japan has faced problems before, but now many people think the situation is very serious. It is like the relationship is at a breaking point. This means it could end or change in a very big way soon. People in both countries are watching to see what will happen before July 9. 2. The rice problem. The president said something new about the trade problem. He talked about rice. The president said that Japan does not want to buy rice from the United States. He said this even though Japan has a big need for rice now. This statement from the president was a surprise. The talks between the two countries were mostly about other things, like cars. Now, rice was a new issue. But is the president's statement about rice correct? Official numbers tell a different story. Data from the U.S. government shows that Japan buys a lot of American rice. In one recent year, Japan bought rice from the U.S. worth almost $300 million. And in the first 4 months of the next year, they bought rice worth over $105 million. This shows that Japan is actually an important customer for American rice farmers. So, there is a difference between what the president said and what the numbers show. Japan is buying U.S. rice. Maybe the real problem is not that Japan buys no rice at all. Experts say the real issue is probably Japan's system for importing rice. Japan has rules for buying rice from other countries. These rules are not simple or easy to understand. Japan agrees to buy a certain amount of rice from other countries each year without high taxes. This is part of an old trade agreement. The United States usually sells a large part of this rice to Japan. However, if Japan wants to buy more rice than this agreed amount, the taxes are very, very high. These high taxes make buying more rice very expensive and difficult for businesses in Japan. It becomes almost impossible to sell this extra rice for a good price. This might be the rice problem the president is talking about. It is not that Japan buys zero rice. It is about these complex rules and high taxes that stop Japan from buying much more rice, even when they need it. Understanding these rules helps explain the difference between the president's words and the actual trade numbers. 3. Japan's big trouble. Japan is now facing a very big problem with rice. It is the worst shortage of rice in many years. This trouble started slowly, but it became serious last year and this year. There were two main reasons for this problem. First, the weather was bad. The summer in 2023 was very hot. This made the rice harvest small. It was the smallest harvest in over 10 years. This meant there was less rice for everyone. Second, something else happened that made things worse. In August of 2024, there was a warning about a possible earthquake. People got scared. They went to the stores and bought a lot of rice very quickly. They wanted to save rice in their homes. This is called panic buying. It meant that stores had even less rice to sell. With less rice available, the price went up a lot. Just 1 year ago, a 5-kilogram bag of rice cost about 2,130 yen. Now, that same bag costs around 4,280 yen. The price has almost doubled. This makes life very hard for people in Japan. It costs much more to buy food. Rice is a very important food in Japan. Schools have started giving less rice in lunch. Convenience stores are selling rice balls and lunch boxes for higher prices. Some supermarkets are trying to help by letting people buy only one bag of rice at a time. This big problem with rice is not just about food. It also affects the trade talks with the United States. Japan needs rice. The United States sells a lot of rice. Because Japan has a shortage, its position in the trade talks is weaker. It might be harder for Japan to say no to requests from the United States about buying rice, especially when facing this difficult situation at home. 4. A new trade rule. The United States government started a new rule about trade. This rule was called a reciprocal tariff. The idea was to make trade more fair between the U.S. and other countries. The U.S. government thought that some countries put high taxes on American goods, while the U.S. put low taxes on their goods. They wanted the taxes to be equal, like paying the same back. Under this new rule, the U.S. planned to put a tax on many products coming from other countries. There was a basic tax rate for most countries. This base tax rate was 10%. So goods coming into the U.S. would often have this extra 10% cost. However, the new rule said that some countries would have to pay a higher tax rate. The amount of the tax would depend on how the U.S. government saw their trade relationship with that country. If the U.S. felt the trade was not fair or equal, the tax could be much higher. Japan was one of the countries facing a higher tax rate under this new rule. The U.S. planned to put a 24% tax on many Japanese goods. This was more than double the basic 10% rate. The reason for this higher tax on Japan was linked to the idea of reciprocal trade. The U.S. government felt that Japan's trade rules and taxes made it difficult for American products to be sold easily in Japan. The 24% tax was seen as a way to match this situation and push for what the U.S. government called fairer trade practices. 5. The talks. Chapter 5 is about the talks. Important people from the United States and Japan met many times to talk about trade. Japan's main person was Ryosei Akazawa. He is Japan's Minister for Economic Issues and their top negotiator. The U.S. person was Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. Mr. Akazawa traveled to Washington, D.C. for talks very often. He made 7 trips since the middle of April to meet Mr. Lutnick. They had many long meetings and discussions. They talked about the difficult trade issues between their countries. The main thing they talked about for a long time was cars. Japan makes many cars and sends them to the U.S. Selling cars is a very big and important business for Japan. The U.S. had recently put higher tariffs on cars from other countries. Tariffs are like extra taxes that make imported goods cost more. Japan wanted the U.S. to remove these higher tariffs on their cars. This was a very important point for Japan in the talks. But the U.S. position was firm. They did not want to change their mind about the car tariffs. U.S. negotiators said the focus should be on putting in place a new system for all tariffs starting on July 9. Then something new and surprising came into the talks. It was about rice. Before this, the talks were mostly about cars and other factory goods. Talking about rice felt different and unexpected. The leader of the U.S. had recently said that Japan would not buy American rice. He also said Japan had a very big rice shortage. But official numbers from the U.S. government showed that Japan actually buys a significant amount of rice from the United States every year. Japan is an important market for U.S. rice farmers. The problem might be Japan's complex rules and system for buying rice from other countries. There is a low tax for a certain amount, but a very high tax, like 200%, for buying more rice than that amount. This high tax makes it very hard to sell more U.S. rice in Japan. So the issue of rice trade became a new and difficult part of the important meetings between the negotiators. Mr. Akazawa and Mr. Lutnick talked for many hours over many days and weeks. They even had phone calls on a recent Saturday, one in the morning and one in the evening, to keep trying to find a solution. But people close to the talks said that big differences and disagreements were still present between the two sides. The U.S. still wanted Japan to agree to difficult things. Japan found it hard to accept the U.S. demands. The deadline of July 9 was getting very, very close. These talks were crucial. The future of trade and the relationship between the two countries depended on finding an agreement. It was not easy to find a way to agree on both the car tariffs and the new issue of rice before time ran out. The pressure was high. 6. A world of problems. The relationship between the United States and Japan is very important. It is important not just for these two countries, but for the world economy. Money, goods, and jobs in many places feel the effects of this link. Now, this trade problem makes things difficult. The dispute is not only about money and products. It also touches politics in both the U.S. and Japan. In the United States, the leader wants to show he is making trade better for his country. He talks to his people about unfair trade deals. In Japan, the political situation is also hard. The leader of Japan is facing important votes soon. The problem with rice and high prices makes people unhappy. This trade fight with the U.S. adds more pressure on the Japanese leader and his party. They must find a way to fix the problem, but it is not easy. Some people look at this situation and think about China. China is a big country in Asia. If the U.S. and Japan have problems with trade, it could help China. China might become a more important trading partner for Japan. This could change the balance of power in the world. The United States and Japan are also strong friends and allies. They work together on many things, like safety in Asia. This trade problem puts their friendship at risk. If the two countries cannot agree on trade, it might be harder for them to work together on other important matters. The trade dispute is like a dark cloud over this important relationship. It shows how difficult it can be for even good friends to agree on money matters. The problems affect people, businesses, and governments. They also affect the wider world and the way countries interact with each other. Finding a solution is important not just for trade, but for peace and stability. 7. What could happen? If the new tariffs start, things that come from Japan could cost a lot more in the United States. For American people who buy these goods, prices would go up. Japanese companies that sell products to the U.S. would find it very hard. A high tariff, like 24%, makes their goods much more expensive. This could mean they sell less or make less money. Many different products like cars, electronics, and parts for machines could be affected. The car business is one of the biggest concerns. If a 24% tariff is put on cars from Japan, their price would be much higher than cars made in other countries. This changes how companies compete. Japanese car makers have also built factories in the U.S. and give jobs to many American workers. These tariffs could cause problems for those factories and jobs too. So, what could happen next as the date gets closer? There are a few possible ways this situation could end. One possible way is that the two countries reach an agreement. This would mean they talk and find a new plan that works for both sides. They might make compromises on things like tariffs or how easy it is to sell goods in each country. Another possible way is that they do not agree by the date. If that happens, the high tariffs could start. Then Japan might put its own new taxes on American goods too. This could turn into a trade war, which is when countries keep adding taxes to each other's products. A trade war makes trade difficult and can hurt many businesses and people. A third possible way is that they decide they need more time to talk. They might agree to wait longer before any new tariffs start. This gives negotiators more time to try and find an agreement, but the problem is not solved yet. The issue with rice is also part of these talks. The president has talked about Japan not buying American rice. Japan does buy rice from the U.S., but it has a very old and complex system for managing rice in its own country. This system includes specific rules, needs for quality, and ways of selling rice inside Japan. Finding a solution for American rice means looking at these detailed rules and finding ways for U.S. rice to fit into Japan's system better. It is more than just removing a tax on the price. 8. The final days. The final days before the big date felt very tense. July 9 was the deadline, and time was running out for the United States and Japan to reach a trade agreement. Leaders from both countries had worked hard for many weeks. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Japan's chief trade negotiator Rosei Akazawa held numerous talks. They met 7 times in Washington, D.C. They even had important phone calls late on a recent Saturday, one for 15 minutes and another for 20 minutes, trying to bridge their differences. Despite all these efforts, serious problems remained. They did not agree on key issues, especially concerning the tariffs, which are like taxes on goods traded between countries. The possibility of new high tariffs starting on July 9 created a lot of worry. If no deal was struck, the U.S. planned to apply tariffs as high as 24% on many Japanese products. This would mean higher costs for American buyers and big challenges for Japanese businesses selling in the U.S. This trade situation was important beyond just buying and selling. It put a strain on the strong friendship between the U.S. and Japan. They are very important partners globally, helping each other in many ways. A trade dispute could damage this important relationship, making it harder to work together on other world issues. Many people around the world watched closely. They knew the outcome would matter for more than just these two countries. It could affect the global economy and how countries interact. The decision was difficult for both the U.S. and Japan. The U.S. side wanted trade that felt equal and fair. Japan wanted to safeguard its economy and its workers. The pressure to decide was immense as the deadline approached. The weight of the moment was felt by everyone involved. The final days were marked by uncertainty and high stakes. What do you think will happen by July 9? Will the U.S. and Japan reach an agreement?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.